Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the second part of our episode on ESG, Environment, Social, and Government Framework. And joining us again today to discuss further is Vipul Arora. He is an ESG expert and a partner at Sattva Consulting. So, welcome back, Vipul.
Thank you, Sanika. Thank you for having me back.
Right. So last time we went into a lot of discussions about what ESG is, what the three pillars are, each of the environment, social, and governance pillars. To quickly sum up for anyone who's probably missed or wants a recap of the episode. So the ESG framework is used to assess an organization's business practices and performance on various metrics, and they are basically placed in order to understand the ethical issues that come up for any business practice, but also provides a way to measure risks associated with just doing your business. Nowadays, investors are also using these metrics to understand how to ethically invest in different companies and also determine their investment plans. This has become a practice known as ESG investing. If I've not summed up very well, Vipul, please step in and you can add your expertise.
Absolutely, Sanika. I think it's a great summary. So what I can add is ESG started in the investment world, because investors need this information, going beyond traditional financial data. And because they needed that, then they started asking for it, and it put pressure on data providers, on standard setting bodies and regulators to ask this of the companies. So that's the direction in which ESG has grown. Standards were set up so that everybody reports similar information. It can be compared. Regulations were made so that it does not remain voluntary and it becomes compulsory, so that investors actually get the additional information that they need.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, so it has become mandatory in a phased manner. So even in India, top 1,000 companies by market cap need to report on BRSR, which is the Indian standard. But obviously, there are many more companies, thousands of more companies that are in the value chain of these top 1,000 listed firms, and they also therefore need to report something to their clients, and then clients need to report to the regulator. So it did not exist as a framework before 2004, and last 20 years it has grown to get center stage. To be on the agenda of the boards of most companies, to be on the agenda of all the major investment funds globally. So I think ESG, we cannot wish ESG away. All the data also, data on pollution, data on we had 6 trillion trees on the planet before humanity was born, and now we have 3 trillion. We've cut down half the trees in the world. And then we complain about climate change. This itself is the single biggest cause. And then we have the fossil fuel dependent industrial, sector. The entire industries in the world, they are very heavy dependent on fossil fuels. And then we have, because of that, production emissions and pollution, and then the consumption also we are not paying attention, right? Sometimes we have choices available, but we're not. So these are the 3 biggest reasons why ESG is here to stay, and climate change is here unless we do something about it. We have serious risks, so therefore it's not going away anywhere. The only thing is, how can we make it more effective? How can we integrate it in the companies in an effective way? So we are actually creating solutions. We are not resisting it. We're not fighting it. We're not complaining about it, but actually, can we quickly integrate it? Just like it happened with technology. So technology is an integral part of doing business, integral part of life. So the ESG has to become the same.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And we will come to that shortly. I think today I want to start with a focus on a little bit of the practical side of things, right? So ESG reporting and compliance are 2 very important topics when we discuss the landscape itself. And I want to understand how these are done. Basically, what are the reporting and compliance standards? Are there different ones globally compared to India? And it's one thing to have an ESG strategy, but it's another ball game to actually have the reporting metrics, the transparency, and the trustworthiness that we discussed quite in detail last episode. So, how do companies and ESG firms actually go about this?
So, companies are at different stages on their ESG journey. You can imagine it like a life cycle, in terms of maturity. And most companies are at the initial stages, the beginning step, where they are, getting to know about it, either because they have a compliance requirement to fulfill, or somebody in their value chain is asking, their clients are asking essentially, or their clients' clients are asking. So they are at the early stage, they are discovering ESG, they're finding out, and now they suddenly realize they have a reporting requirement. They need to give at least some data, or they need to create a formal report, which is a serious exercise, So this is how the most companies are starting. There is a very small minority who see this from a future-proof, long, leadership point of view that, okay, these parameters matter in the long run, how a company is using resources from the environment, how it is taking care of its people, and how its governance ethics are. So they are taking a leadership view, and they have been doing it for many years already. They did not need these standards or compliance requirements to come in. There are some firms that have been doing it for many years. So that's a separate bracket. They are the most mature right now. But for the majority, they are beginning. They're looking at specific standards. And to your question about what are these standards, so India, we have BRSR on the reporting side, but from SEBI.
Can you just explain what the BRSR framework is?
Yeah, BRSR is Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report, which is a set of ESG related indicators that are in 3 different categories, which we have the core indicators which everybody needs to report. We have essential indicators which are industry specific, and then we have the leadership indicators which companies that are really mature can actually report on that. That's a bit optional. That's something if they like they can do it, but the core everybody needs to report. And then there are additional requirements related to assurance of this, that you get an audit done and assure that these have been done in a proper manner. There is some restructuring happening on the assurance requirement. SEBI is reconsidering it, thinking if it should replace it with the assessment, because we do not have enough capacity in the assurance and audit ecosystem to actually audit all those reports.
I see. Okay.
That were going to come out. So capacity, as you can see, is a serious issue, across the entire ecosystem, because everybody is starting, right? Rightfully so. Everybody is starting. So we need to all of us need to upskill very quickly on ESG. So reporting in India is a requirement from BRSR, and then we also have global requirements. So if a company is operating in Europe or they are exporting to Europe, then they have to also comply. If they are of a certain size, they have to comply with the ESRS, European Sustainability Reporting Standards. And the regulation that is demanding it is Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive in Europe, CSRD. There are others that are coming in. These are all very, one can have a soup full of words, keywords. This is sometimes people get very confused about it. So the CSDDD, Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. Now there are product passports also in the pipeline. So there's a massive amount of regulation coming in from Europe. The US SEC, Security Exchange Commission, also has passed a requirement recently to report on climate, and some other indicators. In India, RBI is also has asked banks to report on their climate change, readiness and performance of their assets. There is a serious amount of work done from other industries also. So Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has also created a framework of green credits where you need to report on this. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency has created the carbon trading kind of marketplace ecosystem. So there is a serious amount of work happening everywhere in India and globally. China is about to pass their standard mandating requirements companies to comply in a few years. In Japan, it is already there. South Africa was one of the very early to start. So globally, it is moving, everywhere. So it doesn't matter. And because companies, especially large ones, especially export-oriented ones, they are operating in all markets. So they have no choice. I think they have to report. The best thing is to get ready as soon as possible. Most of the companies, mature ones, are already they're already reporting, or they're getting ready to report. It's the mid cap companies that are in the value chain that really need to step up their work now.
So basically, every country has their own framework and metrics of compliance.
Yes.
There is also a global one that you may adhere to, which usually follows the European framework, because it's one of the most evolved, is what I gather.
The global one is actually, there is another one from IFRS. I missed mentioning that earlier. International Financial Reporting Standard has created its own sustainability standard for reporting, which is Standard 1 and Standard 2. Standard 1 is on ESG indicators and Standard 2 is on climate. So that is aspiring to be the global framework. Japan has adopted it, US, many companies have adopted it. So actually, and there is GRI, which is the oldest global reporting initiative standard, which was used till now as the leading global standard.
Okay.
Now the issue is, and for climate there are there's TCFD, which is getting rolled up into IFRS standard. And now there are more coming, TNFDs coming for nature, task force on nature related financial disclosures. There is another one coming on biodiversity from Europe. So it's a plethora of standards. The good thing is that they are all driving attention to this space, asking companies to take it seriously. The bad thing in that is, or the problem part, that what it is creating chaos, because there are far too many standards, and there is not yet a global kind of a single standard that where everybody is converging to.
Right.
There are conversations happening. So ESRS is very big in its scope because it applies to 50,000 companies that are doing business in Europe or they're domiciled in Europe. So it's a massive impact. But IFRS has also created its own standard, and both of them are trying to create interoperability. They're trying to ensure that a company who reports to one of them also kind of gets covered in the other one, but they've not yet reached that level of interoperability where a company's compliance burden can reduce. So there are those teething issues. Till now everybody globally was reporting on GRI. Now suddenly these two have come. And then India is, if anybody is doing business in India, BRSR and listed in India, BRSR is quite demanding in its scope as well. So there are a lot of teething challenges because all these regulations are relatively recent. Sometimes the guidelines are not clear. Sometimes the rollout itself of these standards and frameworks has not been planned meticulously, has not been planned very well. There's not been a collaborative effort. So the reality is companies have a massive compliance burden. They have a serious compliance burden. They have to organize resources, they have to commit budgets, they have to create data infrastructures or buy data reporting platform subscriptions. They have to massively upskill on people capacity, and they have to create a focus in the organization to actually fulfill these requirements. So there's a serious task ahead. Many of them are already kind of dealing with it. It's very complex, unfortunately, right now. And that's the backlash that ESG gets. And
there's a lot of talk about how all these rating standards are there, but none of them are regulated. And each one brings with it its own issues that actually just make a bigger complication.
So that's another topic itself, Sanika. So there are reporting standards, and then there are rating frameworks. So rating frameworks that's another level of complexity in the ESG kind of value chain. Ratings agencies are those that once a company has reported, doesn't matter to whatever standard, wherever they are, but if they have reported, then the rating agencies start their work. Then they start looking at the data, they start doing assessments, they start doing scoring, they start doing analysis in terms of how robust is the company or not. And they obviously use their own internal proprietary frameworks, rating frameworks to do that. So MSCI is a larger one globally. Sustainalytics is another large one, which is part of Morningstar, which is where I come from. And then there is the S&P DJSI, Dow Jones Sustainability Index from S&P. Moody's used to be there in this. They just stepped out of this business. They quit this business recently. And there are others. There is EcoVadis for supply chain reporting. So there are carbon rating agencies also, which is another kind of discipline in itself. So it's a very fragmented value chain, unfortunately, globally, and that also is the criticism that comes on ESG because there's still a lot of chaos in the ecosystem.
So when you hear about these inconsistencies, what is the way that you see out? What is the plus sides? What can be done better?
So clearly on the reporting side, we need harmonization of standards, at least. The ideal would be to get one single global standard. Okay. But it looks like a very far away dream, to materialize, because everybody who has created those standards, they have their own kind of perspective. IFRS says it comes from the accounting side, comes from the financial reporting standard side. So they want provide that perspective. ESRS says it's coming from the European side. BRSR says it's coming from the Indian side. GRI has its own history. So everybody is saying they're providing multiple perspectives. Now, whose perspective is right? Everybody's perspective in one way, they are bringing their own unique perspective, right? Now, how do you harmonize that? It's not an easy task. So to imagine that we will get a global standard, I believe it's quite unrealistic, or it may happen much ahead. I don't know. It's a pipe dream, but unfortunately, it is needed because it becomes very difficult for a company if they have to report to 3, 4 standards. Large major company exporting out of India has to report to the Indian standard because they're listed here, but also operating in Europe, they have to report there. They have some work in US, maybe they are also listed in US, so they have to report to the SEC, and they also have to report to IFRS because then creates comparability. They were already doing on GRI before, so they have to report to 5 standards now. And the most large companies in India, they're dealing with these challenges. Yes, the software platforms do provide some ability to do this, like you can report on multiple, but it's still very complicated, and for what? You're creating such a huge regulatory burden. It's an overload, right? It's like you're a student and you are taking 5 exams.
Right.
When you know clearly all of them are leading to one goal, which is you want to be a mature company. You want to be a responsible company. So it's like it's a serious amount of overwork is there, and that's the inefficiency right now in the system. But that's an ecosystem issue. I don't know how it. I think everybody needs to collaborate. Governments need to collaborate. Standard setting bodies need to collaborate to solve for this. So that is one thing that should happen in the future. We also do need. That does not mean once we get a global standard that's going to solve for all. No, because we just talked in the previous episode, we also need an Indian standard, right? We need an Indian standard built for Indian context, because this is a problem I face. So I come from the rating side, like we discussed earlier. So 17 years I was doing ESG ratings. Now, we used to work on global rating frameworks in those days and global standards. Indian companies used to be rated low on many indicators because of various reasons, because there was a Western framework that was guiding the rating frameworks, right? Western mindset. So in the West, for example, I will give you now a couple of examples. In the West, if you were doing related party transactions, within a group, let's say you have a conglomerate, they have multiple entities within that group. If you're doing transactions within the group entities, they will penalize you for that because they're thinking there is some, some money laundering happening, or you're not doing business on fair terms. So in the international rating frameworks, Indian firms were getting penalized for that.
Okay.
All these years. I believe even now it is happening. There was another factor that if you would have family members on your board, if you are a family-owned or owner-promoted firm like Adani or Reliance or Birla or Tata doesn't have any family members now, but some of these family-promoted firms, right? If you have family members on the boards of your entities or on your overall board, you would be penalized because then they're thinking that corporate governance standards are being compromised. But interestingly, in Europe, it may be true, or US, it may be true. But in India, it actually works the opposite, because there are, you build something very powerful, very valuable, as a owner promoter, and you don't trust everybody, right? But if you have family members on the board, there is a very heavy amount of trust. You can get a lot done. It's a faster way to build business. So businesses have not reached that maturity that they will become multi-billion-dollar conglomerates, and then you can get professional directors or full-time directors, or you can get professional, managers, CEOs, etc. So Indian companies are in that, stages of the journey where they need family members on the board or in senior management roles. But Western rating frameworks were penalizing them for that. That's why in 2010, when 2007, we started, me and my wife, we started a rating firm, Solaron. And in 2010, we built an India-specific framework, which later was scaled up to other emerging markets. Also, we used to call it Best in Context. And that was built for India. So we used to say that, Indian firms have to be rated on the Indian context. Here, we will not penalize you for having family members on the board. And we were a family-run business also, right? Me and my wife co-started it. We were co-founders. So sometimes we were being questioned, when we used to go to our clients, investment firms, and they were like, "You're a family. Your own governance is not in place because your husband and wife running the same rating agency."
But then there is some measure of truth in the concern, right? Of the ethical issues. In case there are family members on the board, then perhaps some of these ethical issues get compromised or pushed under the rug. How would you then prescribe or consult on that factor.
So you're right. So there is some concern. There could be some concern of favoritism, nepotism. There could be some concern there. But the question is, you have to then match it with the actual performance. You have to
Right.
match it with the performance of the company. So that's why when we build that best in context, we said we are not going to penalize you just because you have family members on the board or in the senior management. By having them is not a disqualification or a penalty. How are they functioning? Let's look at
It
that.
has to counterbalance with the other metrics.
Exactly. Let's
Right.
look at that. So, I mean, if you look at that, then see how their performance is. Are they actually doing well? Now, I will give you an interesting statistic. Tata Group, right? They have a Tata First policy, which means they have so many 100 plus group entities, right? They have a Tata First policy, which means within the Tata Group itself, they will try to do business with Tata entities, other entities.
Okay.
Would you call that related party transaction? No, as long as it is done on arm's length basis, and there are guidelines there for that. You know, SEBI has those guidelines, RBI has those guidelines. So you can actually trade, you can do business, but as long as, and there is assurance behind it, and nobody has anything to question. You know, so policies, just by having that policy or that structure, you can't penalize somebody. You have to actually match it with the conduct. There are well-run professional companies, and they have had accounting scandals and frauds despite the best of global frameworks. So MCI,
Absolutely.
WorldCom, in US, we had the Satyam scandal here in India. You can have the best of auditors, you can have best of standards, but if somebody wants to do fraud, you can't stop them, but you can't penalize them off the cuff. You have to do a serious amount of due diligence to make sure how is their actual conduct versus how the structure is. So this is the point.
I think one of the classic examples that keep coming up of issues within ESG is, say, for example, an Exxon or any fossil fuel company for that matter will be rated much higher on the ESG ratings compared to, say, even a EV company or the new companies that are coming up, which are specifically focusing on sustainability solutions. And that definitely makes you perk up your ears and be a little more discerning in the information you're getting in. So I'm sure you have come across many such examples where the incongruencies in ratings or even the way things are reported in one country versus the other will come to either bite you back or save you, depending on how you report
Exactly.
it.
So the problem with rating models, also you can call them framework or you can call them a model. I prefer to use the word model because it's a model in the end. It's like a construct with some analytics and qualitative data and quantitative data. So it's a model, and models can be changed over time. They are refined, tweaked. The problem with rating models right now, doesn't matter where they are, all around the world, including in India, is that all of them rely on desktop research. Somebody sits on the computer, like you and I are sitting right now, and based on the public disclosure of the company, they rate you. That is the problem with the rating models, because see, look at it. Every company who in their right mind will report the problems that they're having. They will not report their challenges. They will not report issues. They will only report the good side. It's a human psychology, right? So just relying on the self-reported data from the company, you can't do a rating because that's going to be good. Rating model is garbage in, garbage out, or whatever you put in. The data you put in is the output, is the perspective you will get, right?
And numbers can definitely be tortured, to tell the truth.
Exactly. So that's where the greenwashing concern comes in. The problem with all those rating models was they were restricted to desktop research, which is secondary research, self-reported data from the company. Nobody was auditing them. Nobody was validating them. There was no audit or assurance standards in 2007, 8 when we started this, right? And that was a constant criticism I was making in those days also, that you have to audit this, you have to provide assurance. But not only that, you have to go and validate this data, actually do primary research. This was the differentiation of best in context. When we built it in 2010, we said 2 days to get secondary data, and then 2 months to go and talk to the stakeholders of that company, talk to suppliers, talk to employees, talk to ex-employees, talk to customers, talk to competition, talk to regulators. And it takes serious amount of hard work to actually get that data. Once you do that 2 months of effort or sometimes 3 months of effort, you will get a far better perspective of the company, a more realistic in terms of, they may say they have a policy on on anti-bribery and corruption, but actually there are 50 incidents that are there in the news that corruption was there, or complaints are there, or there are court cases happening. That clearly shows there is a serious contrast, right? Rating models need to highlight that contrast, and they were not doing that job. So this is what we try to do that best context. We were very successful. We were able to highlight successfully many risks ahead of time, with companies, global companies. So this was the issue. So, but unfortunately, what has happened is we could not do it for thousands of stocks because it's very expensive. Nobody was willing to pay. So very few clients were using that model. So we could rate maximum 200 companies. But in the investment world, you start with 2,000 companies in the minimum. That's the MSCI All World index. Or you need 3,000, or you need 4,000 companies. 200 companies is nothing. But imagine the cost difference. To rate a company, all the rating agencies in the world right now, they rate a company in a matter of 2 days. Actually, it's less than that because now a lot of tech has come in, a lot of automation. They get the data from reports and they scan it. No human being is actually looking at it. In those days, at least there were humans looking at it in 2007 period onwards. But they would assess it, and in 2 days a rating was issued. And that would be sold at $25 a report. What we were doing in best in context used to cost us $2,000 a report. 100 times cost difference was there, and because of this reason, because investors wanted cheap reports, cheap ratings, everybody was doing desktop research, and so how much money you put in is how much insight you're going to get.
Yes. And how much time and efficiency there is in these. Like, while you want AI to do half of your work and make it most efficient, it's perhaps not the most efficient, so to say, because you miss out on a lot of things. Also, algorithms feed into existing biases. So
exactly. So I mean, automate where you can, obviously, be efficient, but do not remove people totally from the process. AI can give you inputs to help you make the decision, but eventually there has to be a smart rating analyst sitting on the other side with 15 to 20 years of experience to issue a rating, a robust rating that can be defended. And that analyst should have 20 years of deep background in that sector. But because this industry has grown so fast, there were capacity issues, and still there are. Average age of people who are issuing these ratings, 4 to 5 years. Actually, many times less than that, and they are not sector experts. So
this is definitely a challenge, which is like a low-hanging fruit. It can be easily overcome if educational institutions or companies start training already and make the most of the opportunity. Because I know for a fact that a lot of youngsters, a lot of mid-career professionals are coming into this sector and want to start somewhere, but they don't know, or they would probably just be trained with whatever is available at the moment.
This is the exact reason why I wrote the book. This is the exact reason why we're having this conversation, these type of workshops, programs, simply because there's a massive need for capacity building. In fact, I talk a lot about it in the book. I've given there some tools and techniques as well for people to skill up. I'm also working on developing a kind of e-learning program, with our partner Ripple's Learning. Their certification, they have a certification on HR. So I'm kind of building that certificate on ESG as well, so that you can have a massive amount of capacity building is required, and we can have it.
What would you recommend for people who want to enter the sector, or are probably partially already in there, but don't know how to really get both their feet in?
Reading up, scaling up, and it's not necessary that you have to look for a full-time job. Even people who are in existing roles, whether it's finance, systems, operations, manufacturing, services sector, even all those industries, all those roles also need ESG enablement. So everybody needs to read up, everybody needs to upskill, and at the cost of sounding self-promotional, this is the reason why I wrote that book. It's like 3-4 hours, you can get a head start very quickly, because in the internet there is a lot of chaos. You can do a chat GPT query, you will get, but what you will get is basically theoretical definitions. How sustainability is defined, Stockholm Convention, but it's a good definition, but you can't apply it. So here is something that has been written to which helps you get start from A to B in a matter of 4 hours, precisely written for that. So you get the practical sense of it. So upskill using that, upskill using a lot of other workshops. There's a lot of free content being created. People like, and I'm not the only one. There are so many, industry experts, friends and colleagues who are creating, you are doing this effort, right? It's a seriously, intense effort, and congratulations to you for doing it. We need more such things. We need more podcasts, more workshops, more, people are doing knowledge sharing sessions. Industry bodies are doing more and more. We need more certification programs. We need more, courses. But the only thing is, my request is, and I mentioned this in the book as well, please be 100% sure what you are tapping into, what that knowledge resources and the history and background of that source. Please to take a look, because
Exactly, because more courses may not mean the better quality or
exactly.
rightful content. Yeah.
Because in fact, I warn to the extent of saying that half knowledge can be more dangerous than no knowledge at all. Because if you get uh, your concepts from somebody who's also new, because there's a massive opportunity now, and I think a lot of opportunistic people are also flooding into ESG, unfortunately, and climate. Both are kind of related. So as they see a quick buck, they were doing training in other areas for several years, and now they say, oh, let me get into this. But actually, they have zero work experience.
Yeah.
How are they going to train you on this? It's not realistic, right? It's not robust. They may offer you a free program, or they offer you a very low cost, but they've not done the work that is required to get that insight, right? So my caution is to all youngsters: choose your sources wisely. Also choose sources that you feel affinity for, because it's also a case of affinity, right? We always like learning. Remember, there were teachers in school and college, but not everybody would teach maths the same way. Not everybody would teach English the same way.
Absolutely.
So learn from somebody with whom you have affinity, whom you like as a person, whose style you like.
Well, let's bring the discussion a little closer to home, where India's business environment, with its own unique challenges, right? You mentioned about the different issues we are facing in the sector right now. Uh, According to KPMG's report last year, for example, around 75% of Indian CEOs believe that sustainability and long-term business goals through ESG are sort of vital to their success. But only 40% of them actually feel like companies are prepared to meet their ESG goals. And a lot of them attribute this to the challenges in actually implementing or taking up the recommendations that the ESG framework puts out. What do you think are the biggest gaps in preparing companies and Indian businesses?
So one is related to the regulation. One of the biggest uh, challenges. So the good side is regulation has brought ESG as a key focus right now. It's on the agenda. The worst part of regulation, the impact of regulation, is that the moment companies comply, they publish the report, they think their job is done. Some do it internally, some do it with externally by outsourcing it, or they take help, which is fine. But my point is that reporting is just the first step. That is just to get you started. It means that you need to start to think about what you're going to do with ESG. But unless you have a 10-year roadmap on ESG, you're not serious. And I can tell you, we can count on fingers how many companies in India have a 10-year roadmap on ESG.
Absolutely.
It's an open challenge.
Yeah.
So that is where we need to get to. So one is, there is not a strategic appreciation from the top leadership in terms of that ESG is really a long-term play. You need it to win in the long run. It's a strategic competitive advantage, not only for the company in the industry, but also for the industry to survive. Some industries are not going to survive this transition. Next 20 years, industries are going to disappear. Forget about companies.
I mean, we're phasing out coal, so all these coal-heavy industries will have to move to cleaner sources, which is the E pillar. Otherwise, it's hard to survive.
Exactly. So there was a survey. You talk about KPMG. So there was a survey in US. I don't know who did it, but Fortune 500 companies CEOs were interviewed, and more than 60% of them say, 70% actually say that they are seriously concerned if their firm will even last 10 years from now. So they understand it. But problem is they don't look at ESG as a friend, as a help. They think ESG is just a regulatory burden. Let me get it out of the box. So actually, it is not sitting sometimes on the CEO agenda or the chairwoman's or the chairperson's agenda. It's outsourced to somebody in the organization, either a CSO, chief sustainability officer, or a partner, or somebody who's doing a part-time role. That's the worst. This is not somebody to do for somebody to do a part-time role. This has to be is the highest strategic priority. ESG and climate change is going to disrupt companies, industries, economies. There was a report, I forget who it is from, 20% of the global GDP is at risk in the next 20 years. That's going to be the impact, and it's going to be not the same everywhere. It's not going to be applied everywhere. Some geographies and some countries and some sectors will be hit harder than the some supply chains will be hit harder than the others. So if we are not, it's like you're riding the Titanic, and then you are not watching ahead. You may be the biggest ship in the world. Most big companies, that when they get very big, they think that, oh, I'm unsinkable. But if you're not watching ahead, a small iceberg is enough to take you down, because you see only a small part. You're not seeing the huge unhidden part of that iceberg. This is what happened to Titanic. We have enough examples in front of us, and yet
Again, taking the case of Coca-Cola, they have been reporting for a while and were one of the pioneers to start the ESG mandated reporting. But when people started digging in a little deeper, they realized that, they were not accounting for the resources that went into the sugar in the supply chain, the farmers using water and fertilizers in the supply chain to get the sugar to the companies. And now they're in a soup because they have to either withdraw the claims that they have about their ratings or go back and work on the supply chain first to claim net zero.
Exactly. And that's about the product, but also about the plastic. They've completely switched to plastic bottles. And a massive amount of that, is a serious, concern. Their recycling targets on plastic are very, tiny compared to the amount of plastic that they churn in their ecosystem. So there are so many aspects related to this. So this is why I'm saying a serious reflection, it's a strategic conversation every company needs to be having at the board level, that these are very serious issues. It has to start right from the top. That was one issue. That was and reporting is actually becoming a distraction, unfortunately, there. And I think SEBI also needs to, in India in particular, send the right message that, can you please, and I wrote an article on this actually with Professor Stuart Hart, we need to go beyond reporting. We need to unleash the true value of ESG. So the companies need to think like that. And the second issue is what we've already talked, the capacity issues. There is a serious amount of capacity building at the top levels, at the middle management levels, and even at the operational levels, because ESG has to be used as a consciousness. The best use of ESG is a set of principles that every function integrates, just like we integrated technology and integrated quality. TQM, remember, TQM came in the 50s, 60s in the last century, and massive quality movement and Six Sigma, black belt and all that. And it has got integrated, right? It always helps a firm to produce better quality products, have better quality processes. It doesn't do harm. It cuts you cost. It improves your acceptance rate, right? It creates better profit margins. Quality becomes a differentiator. Technology has done that. ESG needs to do the same. This is the natural course of ESG. It needs to be integrated as a set of principles that need to be there in your decision making, in your culture, in your processes, in your P&L, and at the strategic level. Do not restrict it to a BRSR report, please. That will be doing ESG and yourself and the world a very heavy disservice. Absolutely. We need to move beyond reporting. Let's have a 10-year roadmap. Let's have a company-wide framework. Why should we restrict that only BRSR is going to tell me what I should do? Yeah, BRSR tells you the baseline. So it's like passing marks in school, right? 40 out of 100 was passing mark. Is everybody going to shoot for baseline? No. We used to shoot to be a topper, right? We want to be at 100. We want to be at 99. So BRSR and any such standard in the world, reporting standards, gives you the baseline. Do this, do not go below this. If you go below this, we're going to fine you. What do we need to do? Most smart companies, progressive companies, forward-looking companies need to say, how I'm going to go beyond this. That can only be done when you have a 10-year roadmap. How many companies have a 10-year roadmap? I want this question. I would like to do a podcast with you, Sanika, 1 year from now. And I want us to come back with data. You do your own analysis. I will do my own analysis. And let's do a check. How many companies have a 10-year commitment, which they have publicly put in their sustainability report or on their website, that they're going to follow on ESG and climate.
I think that's a great idea. Also, great to make sure that people don't just use this for face value publicity and saying what is the right thing to say instead of actually doing the right thing.
Exactly, exactly. And it's a, you're absolutely right. So across the ecosystem, there is a need to do capacity building, and there's a need to look at this seriously.
Mhm.
And consultants also need to build capacity. Consultants are not, they are an important part of the ecosystem, because not all companies are starting with a head start on this. Not all of them have internal capabilities, so they do need help. But serious investment needs to be made in the consulting firms themselves. Most consulting firms have just switched in the last few years, which is unfortunate, very sad.
Absolutely. Vipul, thanks for these insights. I think these are very honest, and not many people have the courage to say it out loud while being in the industry. I'm sure you face a lot of backlash, but keeping that aside, do you see any trends that are interesting to you or exciting you for the coming year? We're almost at the lee end of the this year, and I'm sure next year promises with it a lot of new happenings in the sector.
Everybody has made net zero commitments. So at least the most mature companies globally. Now reality is kicking in. Everybody kind of jumped on the bandwagon again with net zero. Now those targets they are realizing are not happening for some reason. Either the goals were too aggressive, or they hadn't done a proper due diligence of what is actually possible to deliver, or they're finding capability issues, or they've hit some dead end somewhere. So what I would like to see is that we get again to the core of the issue, which is capacity. Let's understand, have we understood what needs to be done in ESG and climate? Climate is, most people see, is just an analytical problem. Let me just decarbonize and get quickly to the lowest cost pathway and the fastest pathway to take carbon out. It's not just that. Decarbonization is an engineering problem. Please do not underestimate. If you think you can do it just by analytics and running some numbers and without involving engineers, hardcore engineers, you have to take out inefficiencies from systems, industrial systems, manufacturing systems, or service ecosystems, or value chains. It requires serious amount of cross collaboration work. And especially you have to use engineers who can work with processes. Processes need to be redesigned. They need to be made more efficient. So unless you do design thinking, unless you think holistically about the entire value chain, you will not be able to hit your net zero targets. So again, I'm going to bring back to capacity. So the best aspiration for me, what I would like to see in the next 1 year is, again, that how many companies have made 10-year plans for themselves on ESG and climate, and not just in India, globally. You don't find a lot of them. In fact, Unilever has just stepped back because the CEO has changed. They used to have they had a 10-year plus 10-year, 20-year plan. Now they've stepped back on it, which is a tragedy, right? But we need more companies to actually make 10-year plans globally. And second is, I want to know, how much are you investing in your capacity building across the company?
Right.
Starting from the board and the middle management. Can you report that, even if interestingly, none of the standards are asking this question? It's not there in BRSR, it's not there in GRI, it's not there in ESRS, it's not there in IFRS. How many people are you upskilling on ESG and climate? Please. If you're not hitting the root cause of the issue, you're not going to have any progress. So can we start at the highest level? How many companies have 10-year plans? And the lowest level, how many people have been upskilled in each company on ESG and climate? Let's meet next year again with these two metrics, and we'll see how many companies have actually made progress.
That is a very interesting observation. I think it is also very necessary to then take the discussion ahead and talk about other standards and metrics, about the regulatory issues, about compliance issues as well.
And my last comment to wrap this up, even though you've not asked this question, but it's an extension. This is on the corporate environment or the kind of professional ecosystem, right? My request to individuals is, your company may do something, they may not do something. We don't know. Please, as individuals, can you upskill yourself?
I was going to come to that, actually. I'm glad you brought it up yourself. One of the questions I end any episode with is, broader action is not in our hands, but the podcast tries to talk about individual action, individual role, our own understanding of the climate issues. And even though ESG is for corporates or bigger companies, where if I have to do my own assessment, is it possible to do this on an individual level?
Absolutely. If everybody upskills themselves, doesn't matter what you are playing. You must have some existing role. All the viewers, or you're perhaps getting into the job market. If you start using these principles, you're going to have a competitive edge. You're going to have whatever role you are doing, whether you are in multiple functions. Doesn't matter. Uh, you're dealing with customers. The consciousness of having those ESG principles, that you got to build relationships. S is all about relationships. It's not just about people. Most people think the S pillar of ESG is all about people. No, it's about what relationships you have with people there. E is about how you handle those resources, and how wisely you handle them. G is about your conduct. Does your conduct get trust or does it not get trust? These are the three simple terms. If you can start using this, in your work, everybody starts using this, and then you will see your work itself improves, and then continue to upskill, because you will create value. You will suddenly take out waste. You will create new revenue streams. You will build stronger relationship with your customers. You will have better customer retention, employee retention. Your conduct will be impeccable. It will create trust. People will want to do more business with you. So personally, you start to do better, and then
And you
keep
future-proof your own skill set, because
exactly,
things are
because
changing.
today you are in one job, tomorrow you may be in the same firm or another firm. Wherever you are, these skills are going to be required. And when they are looking for people to lead in the leadership roles, you don't have to then start from scratch. You already have a head start. You are ready to become a CSO. You're ready to become a net zero engineer, for example. That role doesn't exist right now, but I'm saying it needs to be created. So these type of things are going to happen. And again, you should be smart. People always prepare themselves for the future. They don't react last minute.
Right, absolutely. I
This
think
is
a slight joke that came to my mind right now is a lot of people talk about personality tests from the ENFP, ENJ, whatever.
oh yes, I
And
remember
I
that.
think we can start talking about this as I'm an ESG personality and strike up the conversation ahead.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is my most sincere suggestion to everyone. Please upskill for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look at the past and try to upskill. Look at the future and upskill yourself to be ready for the future. This is going to be needed in the future. Yet don't become an opportunist, because there's a danger with this. Because sometimes people then think, oh, now I'm getting this certificate, now I'm upskilling, now I want to see return. So that's another, because these days we are very impatient, with
Mm-hmm.
our effort. So that with the social media, everything is made us very impatient. So the danger there is, don't expect immediate results. Have patience. This investment is going to give you return, in your career one day. I cannot tell you which day. I started in 97. There were no jobs that existed till 2004. I had to create a job for myself by creating the startup. And I created a job for myself and for so many others, and not just in India and other emerging markets. It was a painful journey. I cannot tell you. Look at all the white hair, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've aged so fast. So it takes tremendous effort. You have to pay. You have to pay. There's always a cost to pay, either physically or emotionally or through financial resources or whatever, to pursue what you like. So my request is, please don't be impatient and try to look for your passion in this. Maybe you are passionate about water. Maybe you are passionate about climate change. Maybe you are passionate about waste management. Maybe you are passionate about other resources like plastic. Maybe you are passionate about life cycle assessment or circularity. Maybe you are passionate about DEI. Maybe you are passionate about people, how to handle customers well, how to handle employees well. Maybe you are passionate about corporate governance. Try to look for passion, intersection of ESG and your passion, and try to connect that and make an investment in it like you would do in any career, right? So think of it like that. Don't try to seek an immediate return. Is my request.
Absolutely wise words. And thank you so much for your time. I think we'll wrap up the episode here. And I will link some of the resources that you've mentioned earlier, Professor Hart's article, as well as some of the articles that you've written. So, yeah, hope you all enjoyed watching this episode. And for any more information, do reach out to Vipul directly as well.
Thank you so much, Sanika, for doing this effort. I know it takes a lot. it stays in the background, but a lot of work goes behind preparing, researching, writing, asking, and editing after that. So thank you so much for putting all that effort and being a force in this moment that we need very much.
Thank you so much. It's like you said, the passion intersects with what I want to do. So it's easier than anything else that I've done so far. So.